My story really is, in some ways, a near-death story, and to some extent, how digital came to save the day for me. And unlike this photo, I don't think any of the facts are digitally doctored in what I'm about to tell you. So, right. So, as mentioned before, I was originally born in Brooklyn. My parents are Korean. This is really not working well. I'll just go to the old finger method here. I came to this country in 1997. I first moved to Oxford, and then was in London for a few years after that. And in 2002, I moved to the northeast of England, Angel of the North. I'm sure many of you recognize it. And I set up a company called CodeWorks. As mentioned, it's a not-for-profit company. It was core funded by the old RDA. I'm sure, do people still remember regional development agencies? Or, and as mentioned, to support the growth of the digital and creative sectors of the northeast of England. And in our first years, things went very well. We got involved in a lot of sort of UK and European research funding bids. We started helping spin out companies. We had our own sort of regional networks that we were creating with, we started with 30 and it grew to about 130 people, company members. The RDA seemed to be very happy for us, and life was generally very good. Until about 2005, 2006, when the management of the RDA changed, and then the political environment changed along with it. And suddenly there was a real question as to whether or not really digital stuff was necessary in the Northeast, or whether support for digital stuff was important. And there was actually once a very dramatic board meeting where one of the directors of the agency came in and told us that he was personally going to shut us down, which was, of course, quite a bit of a shock for all of us. But we fought on, and we managed to avoid death on that particular day. They then tried to kill us in all sorts of other different ways. So we were constantly being audited for about the next 3 or 4 months, and of course a whole variety of different areas where they were trying to see if there was a way to get us, if you will. And they tried around a whole variety of outputs, but I won't go through it. I won't go through now. I won't bore you with now. They did get us on one, which is that the private income that we were bringing into our company at the time was quite low. And so what they did was they set up a new funding agreement for us where our car costs were dramatically cut down, and that any future funding would be dependent upon us growing our revenue radically by literally a factor of 4 in a single year. So, and we basically had no chance, no choice. I suppose we could either have given up or said, well, we'll try and figure out something. So try we did. And around that time, I just happened to pick up a book called Good to Great. Some of you may have read it. Some of you, hopefully all of you have at least heard of it. And I won't obviously try to summarize the book entirely now, but just to say that I picked up a few things from it, which was around, really I suppose the big part of the book is all about, the main lesson in the book is that when you really want to go from good to great, or if you want to just simply survive, more often than not, what people tend to do is they tend to think that by doing more of everything, that somehow or another the answers will come forth. And the author's prescription, and he obviously backs up with lots of case studies and evidence, is that actually what you need to do is that do less. Figure out what is it you're good at, what is it that you're passionate about, and what's the economic model around those things that is going to take you forward into the future. And to be fair, you know, of course, when they tried to shut us down, you know, I thought this was, you know, brutally unfair and very wrong-headed and things like that. But when we took a sort of cold, hard look at what we were doing, we were involved in loads and loads and loads of things. I mean, this entire cloud of activities we were genuinely doing stuff in. And so at this critical time in our company's history, we said, well, listen, ultimately, if we take this test, what is it that we are genuinely really good at? What is it that we are really passionate about? And then the big question is, what's this formula that's going to radically increase our revenue in the space of a year or so? And in the bottom left, you can see in red there, was the one area where we were seeing a lot of traction. And you know, we were working with a number of different people at the time. And we thought, you know, and we were getting feedback that was literally for some amazing companies that saying, you know, you guys are really, really good at this sort of stuff, and we really want to work with you more. So we said, okay, we're going to figure out something in this little box. We're going to dump everything else and figure out what we can do. And around that time as well, I picked up an issue of The Guardian, or one of the issues of The Guardian, and, which is also something at the time I really almost never read. And in it, I read about a conference called the TED Conference, which was mentioned just briefly before. Some of you may have seen TED Talks or been to a TEDx event And what TED stands for, if you're not familiar with it, it just stands for Technology, Entertainment, Design. And it's a very well-established conference out in California. And in 2006, I managed to get to a TED conference, and I went, and I saw it, and I had an amazing experience. And which I'll get into a bit more about the format in a second. But one of the things that, in addition to it having some amazing people and amazing speakers and an amazing setup, was that they were also clearly making an amazing amount of money. So I was lucky that I was able to beg poverty and get, they do a handful of sort of not-for-profit charity tickets, or tickets for companies that are not-for-profit or charitable causes. And I got one of these deeply discounted ones, but everyone else at that time was paying about $4,500 per ticket. And they had about 1,200 people going. And I found out that, unlike most conferences, the vast majority of people, other than the speakers, actually pay. And then on top of that, they of course get bucket loads of sponsorship. And so, you know, doing some quick calculations in my head, I thought, for a 4-day event, these guys are probably making somewhere in the area of $10 million in 4 days. I thought, in profit. I thought, Christ almighty, well, this is just a wonderful model. So I thought, okay, we've got what we're confident at, we've got what we're passionate about, and now we've got possibly a model that we can adopt. So my first idea was that we were going to call it Geordie TED, and not surprising, the TED people were less excited about that title. So we came up with something slightly more prosaic called Thinking Digital, and we launched it. And you know, for us, it really was a go big or go home. Or we had an expression at the time that was that we're going to go big or go home. Right? We were going to bet the company on behind this event. And TED's well known for getting a wide collection of some of the best and brightest people in a variety of fields, and we did our best to do exactly the same, going literally around the world to try and convince people to come to Tyneside and speak and participate in the event. We situated in our venue the Sage Gateshead, which at the time was probably about 2 or 3 years old, so really basically brand new, a Norman Foster design thing. We then took out all my MBA textbooks and just went down the marketing checklist. We invested in a new brand. We got some great sponsors on board, a new website, an email marketing campaign, print, online, a blog, leaflets, direct sales, about a dozen marketing partners. And would love to be able to say that with this huge investment that we're a huge success from day one. But the reality was that despite the investment, we were really struggling. And one measure of that is that the main auditorium that we hold it in holds about 375 people. And with about 6 weeks to go, we only had about 150 people ticketed for this event, right? And by that time, the tickets were something like £399, right? Which, certainly by Newcastle standards, was a hell of a lot of money. So how on earth we were going to get another 200-300 people to make sure that we made sure we have at least a face-saving number of people was a real challenge. And all this talk about good to great in the TED conference really quickly became all about survival and saving face, and it was a very, very stressful and difficult time. So in the end, we do get there. We don't sell out. It's a massive resource black hole because basically anyone that was sort of within 100 yards of me was in some way or another. I was pulling them in to try and help us out with Thinking Digital. Our financial loss was double what we forecast, but we survived. We get there in the end. And so we decided, well, let's roll the dice for 2009, mostly because we have no other choice but to roll the dice for 2009 because of these targets that we've got to meet. And we launched the conference in September of 2009, and about 2 weeks later, the financial collapse really begins in earnest. So obviously, this is a picture of Lehman Brothers, and Linda, I'm sure you'll recognize photos like this as it seemed to be all death and despair in September, October of that year, as no doubt you'll remember. And the thing that impacted us is that our two biggest sponsors, and certainly our biggest main sponsors, in Microsoft and Cisco, both announced in October that they're not coming back to sponsor. In fact, they're not going to send anyone to even attend the events, right? So, we were thinking in June of 2008, after our first conference, well, we might as well go for it because it can't get any worse than that. And I soon realized, wow, it really could get worse than we thought. And so we roll along and we decide that we're going to go ahead and seriously ramp up our marketing investment. This is in September, October, after all this bad news comes in. But a weird thing starts to happen in about November, December of that year, 2009 we're still in that we start to sell tickets. And we start to sell tickets in significant numbers. And the thing that's interesting is that at this point, we're not actually doing any marketing because we figured, well, there's no point in trying to market this event 6 months ahead of time. We might as well save up all our firepower till after Christmas and really hit people in the new year. And things start to go so well through Christmas time and into the new year that we actually end up canceling all of our marketing. So this large wad of money that we had saved up, we said, well, we don't need to, because by the end of March, before the conference, we actually sell out, much to our shock and surprise. And the results in the end were a hell of a lot better. Our attendance was way up, our revenue was way up, and we converted loss to nearly break even. We didn't go all the way there, but within a few £1,000s. In 2010, this trend continues. So we actually expanded the conference by a further 100 seats. We sell out 4 months early. We actually this year spend nothing on marketing. And during the conference, we become the top topic on Twitter in the UK for 2 days. But not the entire part of 2 days, but at least it's significant portions of 2 days. And then later that summer, we're named in the Media Garden Top 100. 2011, again, I suppose the significant thing that year was that we actually were able to achieve a fully cost-accounted break-even. So all the costs, all the people that were put into it, we're able to actually say, yep, we're making enough money that we can say we're actually going into profit. And in 2012, again, we got some really great recognition. This is from the Metro. We got 2 pages of coverage in the London Metro. And this is a headline from the technology blog called The Next Web. The UK's ends of TED. So I thought, Christ, I guess I can't say we have arrived, but I guess we are making some progress along this original vision and dream. So I don't want to turn this into one of these presentations that's actually a sales promotion. It's really not. I'd like to talk a little bit about what happened here. So as I mentioned in 2008, we don't sell out. There's all sorts of negatives. We lose loads of money, and generally it's pretty black, certainly financially. On the flip side, the feedback we get is absolutely stellar, yeah? And to give you a sense of how good it was, and how, to some extent, how amateurish we were, if you do anything with regard to online surveying today, one of the number one cardinal rule is you got to keep it short, right? There's a business, there's one of the newest of the survey businesses, got a business that's based on you can't ask any more than 10 questions, yeah? We actually put out a 14-page online survey. We didn't test how long it would take until someone said, you know, you have a 14-page online. I've just taken it, and you couldn't get through it in anything less than a half an hour, even if you literally just went and ticked the box without actually paying attention. Despite that, 78% of the people actually respond to it in full. So it was a bit of a shock. And basically they said lots and lots of nice things. And the good thing was that they noticed they liked what we were doing. And as I mentioned before, again, we did all this good traditional marketing stuff. One of the interesting things in that year is that we actually invested next to nothing in social media. We didn't even have a Twitter account on Thinking Digital until 2009. And what happens though in 2008 is that we end up getting basically very lucky in a few areas, in 3 areas. One in blogs, shareable online video, and in Twitter. So in 2008, we happened to have one of the leading UK tech bloggers at the time, a guy named Steve Clayton, who works for Microsoft, and who then blogged about us and said some really, really nice, wonderful things. I don't know if you can read it, but basically he's saying nice things about Thinking Digital and broadcasting out to his audience. Sky News came we invited them, but he didn't know they were going to be coming until they actually came. And they came, they shot a very nice piece, a 10-minute segment about the conference that year. But the great thing is that, you know, in 2008 is that what they do at this point is they then put this video online. So I now suddenly have effectively a piece of marketing that I can link to and send around the world with relative ease. And even 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been basically impossible without me sort of getting a copy, getting it put onto DVD or, God forbid, a video and things like that, and then actually literally physically posting it out to different people. Probably the big thing, though, was on Twitter. And again, I mean, in 2008, 2009, I was one of those people that liked to make fun of people on Twitter. Liked to make fun about the fact that they were tweeting about lunch and dinner and breakfast and whatever else that they were having to be doing that day. And what we discovered, though, and when we started looking back and trying to understand what was happening, is that in 2008, not surprisingly, Google was our #1 referring website. In 2009, that trend is still very much the same, where Google, again, is the #1 source of referral to our website. In 2008, Twitter accounts for basically a pretty tiny amount of that traffic. But what we see in that year is that it jumps by a dramatic number, by a factor of 7 in a single year. And it's not just the traffic, but it's the kind of traffic, because then when we finally figured out, oh, crikey, this Twitter thing might become important, and we started actually reading the tweets about us and understanding how to search about tweets and the tags that people were using, what we discovered were people were, saying really nice things about us, and of course tagging back to that Sky video or linking back to Steve Clayton's blog and other blogs that were out there at the time. And it was, I'd love to say that this was all a part of our strategy. And to some extent, we kind of got lucky, is the reality of it all. And as I mentioned before, so this is just a screenshot of us trending in 2010. And Twitter has absolutely remained a huge part of how the conference has grown over time. So, some thoughts on this near-death experience of mine, which I'll just break down into a few things, into continuous learning, investing in digital, and an outsider's perspective on the norm. And Tracy, how am I doing on time? 5. Okay, cool. I better hurry up. Right. So going into this experience, these are the sort of professional experiences I've had sort of leading up to this job. I spent a couple years at Gray Advertising, working on a Procter & Gamble cosmetics account of all things. I spent a couple years at IBM in their internet division. My first job in this country was at Oxford. I helped set up the online bookshop for Blackwell's. I did the same thing again in London for a German media company called Bertelsmann. And then my final job before coming to Codeworks was working for O2, obviously in the mobile phone area. And so, in my opinion, in terms of certainly marketing the web and email and pretty much anything digital, I assumed I was pretty up on stuff, and I think I was. I mean, I did a fair amount of work in marketing, things like that. But I suppose what I discovered really was that you can teach an old dog new tricks, and I certainly learned some new tricks in this period of time. And for me, I mentioned before about blogs, online video, and Twitter, and now Facebook and LinkedIn, and now Pinterest is the latest one that seems to be coming to the fore. I guess for me, one of the lessons for me that I take is that to some extent, things are changing. People talk a lot about how we're in this time of change and periods. Things are always changing, things like that. And to some extent, you say, well, that's kind of stressful. You know, it's just like, well, I don't want to invest in this stuff and then find that it's like, going to be all made redundant, if you will, in a very short period of time. On the flip side, it also means that there is almost always a new opportunity, a new way of using these tools to either build a business, to grow your business, to save your business in my case, and it's a remarkable thing that we find. And these, of course, these are just a tiny little slice of the tools that are out there. There's obviously, there's still traditional stuff happening, whether it be things like SEO, PPC, which that in and of itself is a sort of black art that constantly is changing as well. There's obviously now the latest thing for us is the rise of mobile. So one metric that I can share, just in looking at our email traffic and increasing our web traffic, is that probably certainly at the beginning of this cycle, when we sent out email, in this case we've got databases of about 15,000 people, maybe a few percentage points of those people would be reading that email on a mobile device, yeah? And this year, in the latest sort of round of communications, I mean, fully 50% are now reading their email and accessing our website via mobile devices, which is just a dramatic change in how we now. So there's this language now going around about having mobile-first strategies and things like that. And that's certainly for us, that's very much been the case, kind of thing, and figure out, well, what can we be doing more with mobile that perhaps we haven't thought about before? And the mobile media. I'll skip that there for a second. I'll just go into investing. Now, one of the other questions I get asked a lot about is obviously, so I'm either new to this stuff or I'm still learning, what should I be doing? And the first thing I always tell people, particularly with regard to the new media stuff, is don't spend any money. That's not the first thing you should do. In my opinion, is that you really need to, a lot of this is just learning, just spending some time to learn what's right for your business. Because it's not, you don't need to be on everything. You don't need to invest across everything equally. It's about figuring out which of these media, so you've got, you'll have some people that most of their activity might be on LinkedIn. Some increasingly these days, particularly if you're in e-commerce, might be on Pinterest. In our case, it's been Twitter, or other people's Facebook and things like that. And I'm going to close just on a section about belief. And now for me, whenever anyone used to talk, particularly if they were the opening keynote, they would talk about belief, I would just think, oh Christ, this is one of these kind of motivational thingies, if you will, And I guess in my experience, I've actually started to understand that there might actually be something to this belief thing, to this confidence thing, that can make a big difference. And I'm going to just play a clip here, which hopefully we've got the sound ready for. You guys ready in the back? Okay, so we'll go here. And it's...
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
So you can't have a digital presentation these days without something about Steve Jobs. But I really, I have an Apple computer, but I have an Android phone, so I'm not one of these sort of Apple fanboys, if you will, that just has got everything Apple, everything Steve Jobs at all. But there are a couple really nice bits in there that I've put there about how everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. You can change it, you can influence, you can build your own things that other people can use. And I would certainly say, starting with the second thing, I really do believe that this digital world upon us means that the tools to do that sort of stuff are cheaper and more accessible than ever before. And I only use my own experience to be able to say that. I genuinely think that the things that we've been able to do with CodeWorks and with Thinking Digital would just simply would have been impossible, even 5 years ago. And I'll end on just, I'm obviously, as you probably tell, I'm not originally from the northeast of England, and as mentioned before, I was born in Brooklyn, and so I just feel that I've been able to bring some outsider's perspective on the North. And there's some obvious things here that, we clearly aren't the biggest, we aren't the richest, we aren't the least expensive place in the world to do business. We are no longer able to generate wealth from the ground, from our waters, or from our own hands, which is where traditionally a lot of wealth has been created. What we do have a lot to be proud of, a lot to be hopeful for, including whether it be education or infrastructure or talent, creativity, commercial savvy, and certainly passion for what we do. I think the one thing that I feel that we sometimes lack is belief in ourselves and belief in each other. And one of the things that I feel that we've been able to do is to start connecting people. And I think the work that Tracy does here as well is so important in that a lot of the answers I've found in terms of how to build Thinking Digital have not been through traditional methods. They've been talking to people. Some of this stuff is happening so quickly that you really need to be talking to people who are doing it. To be able to find that. And of course the inspiration and the courage to do some things that we've had is come from other people. And I'm going to just end on that note, and thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for coming this morning.